Hi, boys and girls. So I'm sorry I can't be there again today, but I want to keep moving forward with history. So you reviewed everything that led up to the Boston Tea Party. That Tea Act, the members of the Sons of Liberty in Boston did not like being forced to buy British tea. And they took a stand by boarding those 3 British ships and throwing the tea overboard into the Boston Harbor, basically sending the message to KG3 in Parliament, we don't want your stinking tea. They did dress up like Mohawk Indians. They clearly did not look like Mohawk Indians. However, King and Parliament did not know who was responsible specifically for the Boston Tea Party, so they didn't know who to punish for throwing all of that tea, worth well over $1 million in today's money, into the Boston Harbor. So, since the king did not know who to punish for the Boston Tea Party, the king decided to give consequences to the entire city of Boston, in hopes that people who knew who threw the tea overboard would turn in the people responsible, so they are not being punished for things they didn't do. For example, if someone drew on the floor and no one fessed up to it, I didn't find out who took marker and drew on the floor, and I decide to punish this entire class with no recess until I find out who drew on the floor. If you knew who it was and who was responsible, would you turn them in? I think a lot of people would. And KG3 basically decided to give consequences to the entire city of Boston until that tea is paid for and he knows who is responsible for throwing the tea into the Boston Harbor. And we talked about earlier how a lot of times things come in threes. So be ready for 3 consequences of the Boston Tea Party. First, the king decided to put a blockade on the Boston Harbor. A blockade is when you take warships and block anyone from entering or leaving a harbor, which means no ship carrying goods to the colonists or exporting goods from the colonists to England could leave the Boston Harbor until the colonists paid for all the tea that was destroyed. That means that the colonists can't get the goods that they need, and colonists who depend on shipping goods out to England and selling them for money can't do that either. This was a huge hardship on the colonies, the blockade of the Boston Harbor. So that reminds me of the word block. When you block someone's way, you're not letting them through. A blockade is just that, but it's blocking a harbor, which is a waterway where ships can come in and out with warships. So remember, be blockade. Unfortunately, the king wasn't done yet. The second part of his punishment, his consequences for the Boston Tea Party, was basically King and Parliament ordered the colonists to quarter British troops. That does not mean to throw money at them. Quarter means a place to sleep. And so, unfortunately, what this rule meant was any time someone came knocking on the door, knock, 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 and it was a soldier, whether it was 1 soldier, 10 soldiers, 20 soldiers, the colonists had to feed let them in their house, feed the soldiers, give them a place to sleep, all with a smile on their face. Now remember, these colonists don't like having these British troops in their town to begin with, and now they have to let them in their home, give them what little food that they have, give them their beds to sleep in, all with a smile on their face. So that's 2. We have the blockade of the Boston Harbor, and now Parliament was ordering colonists in Boston to quarter troops, to let the troops in their homes and give them a place to sleep. No questions asked. Remember, this comes in threes. So the last one, which many say is the worst one, deals with that babysitter in Boston, the babysitter of Massachusetts. Now, the governor of Massachusetts up to this point was a governor named Governor Hutchinson. Now, clearly, this babysitter was not doing a very good job if he let the Sons of Liberty throw so much tea into the Boston Harbor right under his nose. And so KG3 in Parliament replaced Governor Hutchinson with a new governor. His name was Governor Thomas Gage, otherwise known as General Thomas Gage, and he became the new babysitter, the new governor of Massachusetts. Now you might ask, why is this such a big deal? Well, General Thomas Gage is not just any old person. He is actually the head of the entire British Army in North America. He is powerful. He is mean, and he can get his way any time he wants. Having a governor like Thomas Gage will make it much more difficult for colonists in Boston to do anything that the king and parliament would not like. So, again, colonists thought that these laws, these consequences of the Boston Tea Party were intolerable. They went through the streets of Boston saying, it wasn't us, we didn't do it, why should we be punished for what other people did? And that was the king's goal. The king's goal was to make life intolerable, unable to be tolerated by the colonists. By the colonists, by making laws and rules that all the Boston colonists needed to abide by until it was found who threw the tea into the Boston Harbor during the Boston Tea Party. Now, you do need to remember these 3 consequences. So I remember Big Queen's Giggle. Big Queen's Giggle. Take a second to think about what the B in Big Queen's Giggle stands for. Take a second to think about what the Q in Big Queen's Giggle and the G. Now, if you remember, the B stands for Blockade of the Boston Harbor. The King's Navy was not going to let any ship in or out of the Boston Harbor until all that tea has been paid for. The Q stands for quartering troops. This is not throwing money at them. This is any time a troop comes knocking on your door, you must let them in, give them a place to sleep. Quarter means rooms to sleep in. You must bring them into your home, give them food to eat, give them a bed to sleep on, all with a smile on your face, whether you like it or not. And the G in Big Queen's Giggled was Governor Thomas Gage. Boston, all of Massachusetts got a new babysitter, a more powerful babysitter. Governor Thomas Gage was the head of the entire British Army in North America, a pretty bad dude. Now, originally, this law was named the Coercive Acts by the King and Parliament. And it was named that for good reason. To coerce means to force. And really what the King and Parliament were trying to do was they were trying to force colonists who knew who threw the tea into the Boston Harbor, who knew the Sons of Liberty were responsible, to turn them in. But this law quickly got a new name, as colonists were running through the streets saying that these rules and these laws are intolerable. This became known as the Intolerable Acts. And that's going to be the next episode of Liberty's Kids that we're going to watch. It is called Intolerable Acts. Look for Big Queen's Giggled while you're watching. I know for sure you'll see the B, the blockade. I know for sure you'll see what it looks like to be forced to quarter troops. I don't think they mention Governor Thomas Gage in this particular episode, but they will in future episodes. So please enjoy this episode and see how all of Boston suffered from the Sons of Liberty's decision to throw tea into the Boston Harbor, how all of Boston suffered from that Boston Tea Party.